Today's message from Dr. Christian Sorensen was recorded November 11th, 2018, and it's titled High Tithe, affirming I'm one of life's generous givers. And today we welcome back the awesome talent of singer-songwriter Jamie Lula, who can be found at his website or his Facebook page. If you're so inspired after listening to the message and the great music, come by seasidecenter.org and consider making a donation. And of course, you can always join us in Encinitas, California sometime, where we always have great music, a spirited message, and a truly joyful, loving, vibrant community that await you.
All right, Seaside, do we not get the greatest musical guest artist here every Sunday? Today is absolutely no different. This fine gentleman is here, and I knew it was going to be a powerful morning because we were already on the same color palette. And that's something else. He is a singer, songwriter. I'm sure you all know and love him. You can meet him after the service. Please, everybody, welcome Jamie Lula.
Good morning, y'all. I love this community. I love my much younger and better looking and more hair brother Christian.
I'm catching up, Jamie.
You are catching up. I'll teach you how to shave it. I appreciate the generosity of this community, and it's all the years that I've been coming here. The time I went to the other place over that was down on the other side of the freeway once, and then I was very early on when you had just moved in here. I came here. And I just love what this community does, what it represents. This is a Floyd Lula song, brand new. Walk a mile or a minute in another man's shoes. He's got a path to take to find his truth. Any way you spin it, he's a lot like you. Finding his faith on roads that you never choose. Keep on a walking. Keep on a walking. Let love be your only mission always. Let go of all conditions. Let love be your only mission always. Keep on walking. Keep on walking. Tell a tale, you're in it. Hear a brother man's blues. He's got a destination and no excuse. Why do you condemn it when it's not your own? You can't unsee it once the light has shone. Keep on walking. Keep on walking. Don't let it blind your vision. Let love be only vision always. Let go the old conditions. Love be your only mission always. Don't let it blind your vision. Let love be your only mission always. Let go the old conditions. Let love be your only mission always. Keep on walking. Keep on walking. One foot in front of the other, hand in hand, one with another. Walk with your sister and brother always. One foot in front of the other, hand in hand, one with another. Walk with your sister and brother always.
Jamie's got a good one there. That is a hot one. Boy, the Lynn Floyd combo is a winner, that's for sure. Great job. Jamie, that is a perfect song for this morning. Walking side by side, hand in hand, love's our only mission. This is good. This is good stuff. That's what Seaside is about. You know, it is, we are family. We are in this together. It is about home. It is about coming together and being here for one another. And together we have created this amazing spiritual community. And together it has moved through decades of time because individuals have chosen to hold hand in hand and to walk together in that love and making that love our mission no matter what comes up, because things do come up. And together we're stronger. You know, I was watching a whaling movie this week because ocean, you know, it was Heart of the Sea. And, you know, I watched the ropes that they held these ships down, and these ropes are made up of just little teeny vines. And they put all these little twine or whatever these small pieces of rope are, they put them together. You know, one you could break, but together they're strong enough to hold a ship in. That's what this community is about. You know, sometimes we're feeling weak, like we can be broken, but together there is such power in the sense of community. And then I watched on this movie how they actually get the anchor up. I've wondered, how did they get the big anchor up before motors? And they've got a wheel, and they get a bunch of guys that walk around this wheel, and it pulls the anchor up. Not one person could have lifted that anchor on their own, but 4 or half a dozen guys can carry this big weight from the bottom of the ocean. Together, we are able to move through challenging times of shootings, of elections, of fires. We come together and we talk about that sometimes. And it is just together that we are stronger for sure, because we're remembering Spirit. Yeah, that's right. You know, there's a story that Jesus, a master teacher, said, or he didn't say, I came here to make life tough on you, for you to be frustrated, bound, and limited. The story goes that he said, I came to fulfill the prophecy. I have come that you might have life more. There you go. There's some of you that remember it from your Bible days. You know, I have come that you might have life more abundantly, not to struggle, not to have difficulty. And so then we have these challenges in our life. And I'd like to say, you know, we don't get challenges, but there's an interesting thing about that, is that resistance in the air is what allows the birds to fly. You know, James, he flies his planes into the wind, which lifts it up. You know, fish swim with resistance in the water. We swim because of resistance in the water. We're able to paddle out because there's resistance. We pull ourselves forward. We walk on Mother Earth because there's resistance. We're able to push ourselves off. And so what I want us to get is that sometimes that resistance isn't really a bad thing. And Ernest Holmes, you know, the founder of this whole shebang, he said that we often should affirm every day that there has been no mistake, that there is no mistake now, and there can be no mistake. It's like, man, that's pretty broad. You know, we're talking about some challenges going on here. But in the realization, if you understand the fuller picture, you come to recognize oftentimes that the challenge, the resistance, and the difficulty is what takes to stretch you. It has you stretch into a greater place. You know, there's a young guy who's taking his girlfriend up into the mountains, and what for? I don't know. But, you know, and she looked at the path they were hiking up, and she said, there's nothing but rocks and boulders in the path. And he said, that's it. That's the path, are the rocks and the boulders. And sometimes in our life, we forget that the rocks and the boulders are the opportunity for us to climb ever higher. And the perfection of our journey sometimes isn't known until the end of the journey. We don't get how, you know, serving and being hurt or something can be a blessing in our life. We don't understand how the challenge in our world may be a blessing, but it's that kind of resistance that allows us to dig down a little deeper. And when we continue to remember to put Spirit first in our life, you know, as Moses said to his people, I shared it with you last week, you know, remember the Lord your God, for it is He that gives us the power to experience wealth, to get wealth. You know, it is the Lord, it is the Spirit. So when we have the resistance, what we want to do is be able to turn to Spirit first and recognize there's a fuller picture here. I may not get it, but what happens is most people are designed to go to their default first, and their default often happens to be, this is rough, life isn't fair, they're out to get me, default is protect what I got, you know, defend and all that. What I want us to do is to live our life from design, not default. Not from accident, but from purpose, from plan, from the ideal, to recognize, you know what, this is what I'm going to cast out upon the waters. Remember when we were talking about cause and effect, that which you cast out upon the waters, the bread that you cast out upon the tide comes back. On the rising tide, it comes back, lifted ever higher with greater good. And with that said, what I've come to recognize, it doesn't always come like right back. You know, it's like sometimes takes a little time for it to circulate around, to reciprocate back into life. Let's say I were to pray for patience. You know, it doesn't mean that tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. and go, ta-da, I'm now a patient guy. Yeah. It tends to look like 3 or 4 months down the line, I find myself in a line or in traffic running late for an appointment, and I'm experiencing the very contrast, that resistance that is allowing me, do I really believe Spirit here? Do I believe that patience is the truth of my being, and I am not at the default or the reaction of what life is stirring up on my behalf? You know, I get to make that decision here. Do I have the patience to do that? Because what I've recognized is that, you know, life isn't always easy all the time. Yeah, well, maybe for you, Garuda, but you know, but if I can recognize that it is always blessed, because I continue to put Spirit first, I continue to recognize that there's always that reciprocating tide, then I can begin to trust that the perfection may not be known until the end of the journey, but I can live with a sense of trust and faith because I continue to keep Spirit in my face. I continue to remember it is God that gives me the power to move through a situation, and I become the vortex in which it expresses, in which it gives, in which it comes out into the world. You know, I'm sure I've shared with you guys, you know, the story, Callie and I, when early days of Seaside, and I'm trying to think where I want to go with this. That in terms of giving, you know, sometimes you give and you're expecting it to come back from a certain place. And so it was back in about 98, the spring of 98, that there was an opportunity to put myself up to be the leader of our movement. And so in 98, in the spring, I was voted as president of this movement. And it was a great honor. It was exciting. It was dynamic. And I didn't get a nickel for it for 4 years. And it was like a full-time job, as well as Seaside, a full-time gig. You know, I live and breathe Seaside, and now we put in a whole movement that I had to run around the planet, which was a lot of fun. I loved it. I loved showing up, inspiring, healing, helping, and doing all things. I was doing it because I loved it, not because I was being paid for it. And Callie's sacrifice to the whole thing was I never get a husband anymore. You know, and it was like, what are we getting out of this? And that is the mind that's looking, I want to get back from here because this is where I'm giving it. But what was interesting for us at this time, for 4 years that we did, is 98 in the spring, I was elected to be the community spiritual leader. And by the fall, Seaside had entered into a contract to purchase this building out of a bankruptcy court. And it's like, did one have something to do with another? Another interesting thing, as I served for 4 years, we continued to build out this place. And 4 years in the fall, we moved in 2001. It's kind of interesting, the same time frame that was going on there. Also, what was interesting is that Callie and I, we had this little beach shack that somehow we got blessed to get in Del Mar, which all of a sudden we discovered was worth something. And we were able to end up with a dream home that we also moved in 2001 in the same month. And probably the most dynamic thing that transpired in that time is Callie and I had been trying to have a child for many years, which is a lot of fun, but it didn't quite work out the way we were hoping. And within that time, we were presented with the opportunity to be able to adopt our son. And we were there, and I was able to cut the umbilical cord the day, you know, he was born. And it's like those three amazing things didn't directly come back because this is where I was giving, but I was giving from joy without expectation. I was loving what I was doing. Callie was in the whole thing. And what is happening, Seaside was blessed. Our life was blessed. We had a child in our world. And I share that because we're dealing with that which is omnipresent, that is everywhere. And so you're giving in one spot that represents Spirit to you. It feels good to be in that place of flow. The high tide that is flowing through you on out is making a difference where you are. And what is happening is your world is being blessed in other areas. And you get to just say, yes, this is my moment. Like today's an interesting day. If you're a numerologist, you realize that not only is today like 11th month, 11th day, but those who count up numbers in numerology, it's like 2018 adds up to 11. So people are thinking it's 11, 11, and 11, which somehow means like the portals have opened up, the good is coming forward, the blessings and the grace, the master numbers, and all these kind of things that may go with it. I really know nothing about that. But what I do recognize is that 11 is really a fun number. Something in me feels good. And so I have been tithing all my life, and as I've shared, tithing is a representation of a 1. It's a 10. It's easier to keep track of, as I shared with you last week, than 7.3. But what's important is that it is a regular systematic percentage that you're returning back to Spirit. It's the first fruit. It's the first substance. Spirit is that which gives. You do that. And 10%, like according to Eric Butterworth, should be your training wheels. It's a nice number that you can regularly, systematically hit, but at some point you want to just move beyond that and be considered a giver in life. Spirit flows through you, generosity flows through you. I don't need to keep track by numbers that I'm a generous kind of person. You can just look at your checkbook and say, wow, I'm a generous kind of person. But so anyway, where I'm going with that is 11 just seems to be number. So I'm committing this day to move from my 10% giving to 11% giving because it is a great number that feels good and the heavens have opened up and I'm blessed in this moment. So do what you want with numbers, but have fun with them. Don't make it such a big onus that is heavy upon you. Open up and allow yourself to stretch. Allow yourself to grow. Allow yourself to expand because Spirit wants to pour through you. You probably know the story of Elijah, who had a person who assisted this prophet and ended up dying within his tenure of serving the Lord. And the widow came to Elijah and said, you know what? Our family owes whoever the lenders are, and they're going to take my 2 sons unless I can pay them, and I have no money. And Elijah said, what I want you to do is go into your house and close all the windows, all the blinds. In other words, I want you to go into your consciousness and just shut out all the naysayers, the default, the resistance, everybody that just says you're crazy for what you're doing. And I want you to have your sons go borrow as many jars and jugs and crusts or whatever that you can and start pouring that little drop of oil because you told me is all you have is a little oil in your house. That's all you got. I want you to just start pouring that little bit of oil into every jug. And she fills up one and the next one and the next one and the next one and to all the jugs in the neighborhood. And she says to her son, go get another one. He said, there aren't any more. And she says, well, there's no more jugs. And the oil stops. Boom. You see, it pours until you say, that's it. There's no more space for God. I've maxed out. But the key here is it pours through you. It moves through you. Remember last week I gave you the assignment to sit and contemplate the wonderful spiritual perspective of I and the Spirit are one. Yeah? I and God are one. And all that the Spirit has is mine. Remember that one? Good. So I did it, and I just sat there day after day. The Father and I are one, the Spirit and I are one, God and I are one. All that Spirit has is mine. And what began to come from me was like this heat, was this radiance. And what I began to recognize as we talk about the Christ light, notice that light, the Christ light, I am the light. That level of consciousness is a light. It is an emanation. And the thing about light is it pours out. The light doesn't take in. The light emanates. The light gives, and it comes from within. As that Spirit moves from within us, there is a lightness, there is a light that's not taking back. It is just allowing itself to be and to share. And as you continue to pour forth the oil, to be in that place of givingness, of sharing that light, it continues to pour forth into your world. And you come to recognize that God's my sufficiency. God's grace is my sufficiency, is what it says. God's grace, that touching, that blessing, that breath, that feeling, that grace is that which restores my soul. It brings, and only if it pours through you, it's got to move from this concept of this is how it works to your activity. You become that activity of Spirit. And the Spirit reciprocates back. In the first chapter, or the first book in the Bible, Genesis chapter 31, verse 41, the guy's working for the Lord. And it says, and God increased my wages 10 times. That's kind of the 10% thing. It seems to be an easy calculable number. Didn't have to figure out, those percentage of taxes. It's increased to 10%. The point here is that spirit, when you're doing spirit, when you're remembering spirit, what you find is spirit continues to increase your world, support your world, but you've got to share it. You got to allow it to pour through you. It's told in Malachi that bring your tithes into my storehouse so there's food in there, says the Lord. And I challenge you, he says. Try me. Test me is what it says. Test me, says the Lord. And I will open up the windows and pour forth blessings until you say, whoa, that's enough. Can you imagine having blessings pour forth into your world because the windows have been opened from the infinite, the sea that is stored with these infinite amount of treasures, and I have paddled out, I have changed, I have got a space for something new to show up, and it is pouring forth, and I'm going to say, no more, God, that's enough. I wouldn't do that. But look at Elijah, who said, oh, that's it, I run out. Somewhere the default kicks in. All of a sudden the resistance kicks in. The old tapes begin to do it. And what being in the flow does is it allows us to remember that truth and that blessing and that gift that comes from being in that light. Maya Angelou said that in addition to other benefits, giving liberates the soul. For me, liberating the soul means free. I'm free of worry, concern, I'm not afraid of they're going to get me, the bill payers, the tax collectors, the doctors, whatever. I'm free. I've got this freedom of my soul. My soul has been liberated, which is why to be able to be in the flow will assure that you receive. Always has, always will. Being in that flow turns on the spigot, so it pours forth blessings and you say, whoa, it's enough. There's another one, it comes from third proverb, verse 10, where it says, honor the Lord with your substance and your first fruit, so your barns may be overflowing and your wine press bursting with new wine. I like that. Bursting with new wine. Isn't that a great sound and visual? Bursting with the new wine, with the new spirit, with the new life. But I've got to realize that I've got to be in the flow. And what being in the flow or giving means is I'm giving up my addiction to money. That addiction to money means I got to save it. That's the default. I got to protect it because there's only so much. Others are trying to get that. What I've got to do is give up that addiction and recognize that, it is an energy flow. It is an exchange. It is a movement of a life force. It is a power. It is something that is able to move, but it has to move or it has you. That power has you trapped. Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate, considered one of the robber barons, ruthless business person in his era. But at a certain point in his life, when he was the richest man in the world, and he laid down, the steel magnate, he laid down the railroad tracks. That was his steel. He built, the first skyscrapers on his steel. He was doing good for America, but it got to the point where there was so much money that he had that he came to recognize, and, there's nothing else I can do with it other than begin to make a difference with it. Interesting shift. There's nothing else I can really get for myself. I got it all. And so what he really did is he initiated the new consciousness of philanthropy. He was really the first who said, I spent the first half of my life accumulating, and he spent the second half for the rest of his life giving it away, so supposedly he left with nothing left in his bank accounts. And his thing, as many of us know, was libraries. He doubled the libraries within our country, the education he began to support. All of a sudden, he wrote the book called The Gospel of Wealth, or essay anyway, that influenced his buddy John Rockefeller. Said, man, if Carnegie's going to do it, I'm going to do it too. And he started pouring, bucket loads into different foundations to support. And all of a sudden, there was a new kind of giving that began to emerge in our world. And you can sit there and say, aren't these Individuals just, they got all the money. But all of a sudden something shifted, and it's happening today, where Carnegie was about education and, Bill and Melinda are about eradicating epidemics upon the planet. You got Bono, rock star, not quite at that same level as those guys, but his mission is to eradicate third world debt from the predatory loans, when they were given these bad kind of loans. What is it that you can do? Ted Turner once again reinitiated that kind of thinking. I can still remember when he gave the $1 billion or pledged for $1 billion to the UN. And with that, Gates and Buffett got together and started what they called, what is it? The wealth pledge? I'm forgetting it. The pledge of, anyway, what it is that they started to say to the billionaire friends that, will you make a pledge that you will give away half of your wealth in your lifetime? And to this date, they have 120 individuals that have signed that pledge to be able to that count me in for giving it away. See, and it's what you can do with it. These individuals has created a new state of awareness. It's not what you have, it is what you give. It is what is important to you. You want to know what's important to you? Take a look at your checkbook or your credit card statements. You'll see where you're spending your money. That's what is important to you. Oh, that's not, my bills. Well, are the bills more important, than God? What is most important? Take a look. You'll come to discover that there is something there. But you don't have to be one of the billionaires. There was this kid. I've shared this story. I'm sure I love it. It was a while back. It was time when ice cream was not the same expensive. It was pre-Haagen-Dazs, when you could get ice cream for not so much. And this little kid, 10-year-old, goes into Five and Dime, where they have counters, and he sits down at the counter and he asks the waitress, how much is a sundae? And she says 50 cents. Reaches into his pocket, pulls out all of his change, nickels, dimes, pennies, counts it up, and says, how much is just a plain ice cream? And she says 35 cents. And he says, okay, I'll take that. She's getting a little perturbed at this moment. This kid's kind of, taking up the time, not ordering much, counter space and all that. As she comes, she gives him the ice cream, the bowl of ice cream, writes out the ticket, puts it on the counter, and goes away. And the kid finishes his ice cream, and he gets up, and he takes his ticket, and he goes over to the cashier. He pays them the 35 cents. And he walks out of the store, and the waitress comes to clean the counter. As she's wiping it, she noticed that kid gave her 2 nickels and 5 pennies, his other 15 cents that he could have had a sundae. But what was more important to this little guy was to leave her a tip just with a thank you. See, that's how it feels good to be in that giving kind of place. It is an energetic, it is the activity of spirit, it is an extension of consciousness. It's not about words. Hey, I'm generous, but are you? And it goes beyond just financial. It goes to time and talents and all those pieces. But Emerson, a great American essayist, wrote in his essay on compensations that one of the most beautiful compensations is that you cannot sincerely attempt to help another without helping yourself. See, that's the tide, that's the bread that's cast out, that is cause and effect, that is what is coming back into your world. It is through your actions. Are you willing to give your last 15 cents? That was as much as the $1 billion to Ted Turner, if not more, because it left that little kid with nothing other than a heart and a knowingness. This week we had the shootings. Up in the Thousand Oaks area. I spoke about that last week, so I won't talk about that really, other than it brought up for me, like one of the first ones that caught our nation, and we were all very responsive. Remember Sandy Hook? It was December, so it was about this time in 2012, and as I thought about that, I remembered a story that came from that time, that school where shooter, besides having his own life taken, there were 26 that were killed, 20 of which were children between the ages of 5 and 10, just horrendous. And the story I was thinking about was JT's younger brother, who was 6 years old, was in the classroom when the shooting started. And at one point, the shooter's gun stuck or jammed. And this little 6-year-old told all his little buddies, go, 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 run. And he saved many lives of little kids. Just naturally, this is what came forth through him. Unfortunately, he didn't survive because as soon as the gun started working, the shooter took him. And I left with the sense what it would be like to lose my brother like that, or a parent to lose your child. But what's interesting, and why I'm sharing this story, is JT was given some help, and in the following year, there was a Skype call that came from some of the orphans in Rwanda. If you remember the Rwandan genocide where there were nearly 1 million Tutsis killed by their neighbors, the Hutus, by machete in a 100-day period. And these kids were sharing, and this one little 11-year-old, this one girl spoke up to JT on the Skype call from across the planet and shared her story of what it was like to be made to watch her parents be hacked to death and then to have her neck slashed and thrown into a collective grave and then have the dirt buried over them. And that she had a will to live, or something, that the grave was shallow enough that she was able to dig herself out of that. And she went off into the hills and hid out in the dark forest for the next month while she sat in those mountains watching her town burn house by house and the screams of the people she loved being killed. And she lived on grass in the mountains for a month. And what she shared with JT is that this will be hard to believe, but you don't have to remain angry and upset. That shooter doesn't have the power to take away your happiness. And you may not get that. It can turn around right now in this moment, but I want you to know the 3 things that have worked for me. And he looks at this Chantal's face as just radiant, and she's giving her wisdom and to this young 13-year-old JT. She said the 3 things are: be grateful, you've got to forgive, and express compassion. Be grateful for anything, but I got to tell you, you're in a part of the world that 6 billion other people would give an organ to be living in. You got a lot to be grateful for. Forgiveness, you have to forgive the shooter and the family if you want to be free. And compassion, you got to find ways to give. For me, what I have done is I've opened up an orphanage, and I'm taking care of some of the orphans from the genocide, and that is how I'm serving. And with that, she completed the call, and little JT is excited, saying, I don't have to live with this. And he figured, what can I do to give? I'm only 13. I don't have any money, but Chantal, what a difference. She was an angel. She was sent from God. She made a difference. He said, I want to figure out how to raise money to send her to college. And so he spent the next several months raising enough money to send Chantal to college for the first year. And when he told Chantal said, oh, that is so exciting. But you know what? Sometimes in third world countries, we are not given the right opportunity to be able to go, and it doesn't work because I'm trying to take care of these kids, and I've got a shop that seems to be working, and can I give it to my best friend who was part of this experience? And he said, sure. And all of a sudden, so Chantal became a giver to the best friend became a recipient. JT became just filled with joy for what he did, that he was so excited that he became part of a group that has gone on to assist 75,000 Rwanda orphans. He's part of a group because there was something inside of him that realized that giving is what makes the difference, to feel the joy and the love within the heart. That healing is a real possibility, that I do not need to be stuck behind the resistance or the boulders or the rocks that are in my way, that I may be fighting upstream, but maybe it is that very resistance that gives me the power to stand up here as Daniel did with PTSD and said, you know what, I am able to function in this world now, and I am greater and better because of what it is I have gone through. You listen to James say, I'm flying. I'm flying against the resistance. There is something inside of us that is greater. And when we're caught up in the journey, sometimes we forget the perfection of Spirit overseeing the whole thing. And so what I know about Seaside is that we continue to be a home that makes a difference in lives. You see the children here. I can't even count how many hundreds, if not thousands of children over the last 30 years have come through our community that are now out in the world bringing the positive philosophy. When people are living in fear, they're saying, you know what, there's a higher way to think about this. You can give in to the resistance, but I want you to know, Ernest Holmes says, I got to affirm that there are no mistakes today, yesterday, or forward, and that I got to know something here is greater than this. It is a place where healing is going on. We are hearing these stories here today. We hear them all the time. It is a place where we can come in the times of hurt and pain and times of joy. Our school of ministry, we have cast more than 100 ministers out into this movement of religious science that is going to carry this light to the world. We are making making a difference with our live streaming that is touching more people than we're ever going to be known. That is the kind of foundation that has allowed our individual expression to become a mighty rope that can pull up the anchor and allow us to paddle out into the greater adventure, creating greater space for greater good. But only together in community can we do this. Oh, we can do things privately. Meditation's great alone, but you can't celebrate in community by yourself. And what you are part of is 30-year legacy of individuals who said, you know what, Seaside is God expressing, and I'm willing to support that for me today and for those that are yet to come. And so this is the one time of the year where we say, you know what, we're thinking about what we're going to be doing next year in 2019. And we can just say, God will provide and go blindly into the future. But like any good family, towards the end of the year, you roll up your sleeves and say, okay, we're going to put together a budget for the upcoming year. So, we can grow with it. We can expand on it. But you know what? We got a pretty clear idea what we're going to do. That's what we do here at Seaside. You have a fabulous board of trustees that take their fiduciary responsibility very seriously. And this is the one time of the year we ask the family, this is our home. Say, hey, what's your intention for next year? We recognize that, if something happens and you can't meet that, let us know. That's okay. We understand that something may happen and you may hit the lottery, and then we can build our sanctuary on the hill. There are all sorts of options. All that we're asking is right now, in this moment in time, if you call Seaside home, if you love how Spirit's expressing the things that are going on, and you're planning to be part of this community next year, how do you intend to support us? Give us a heads up. We're going to take all those and put it together and plan in an intelligent budget, if you would, and put that forward. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pray in a moment. And I'm going to ask you to take those intention cards that you have in your program or that you signed at home. And if you didn't get my letter this week at home, it's because I don't have your address. So make sure you get it to me. But they're in your program today. And I don't want you to fill them out right away. Unless you have. But then you can always add it from 10% to 11%. You know how that goes. I want you to stretch. I'm stretching. Callie's stretching. I invite all of us to stretch because as individually we rise, the whole tide, the high tide lifts all of Seaside. And so I'm going to do some prayer and try to just help activate your heart so you listen to it. Jamie's going to sing a song. And when Jamie's done singing, then will be your time to fill out this pledge card and let us know what you're thinking about supporting for next year. So relax. And just feel that presence right here in this moment. Feel that wonderful flow of the divine, knowing that it truly is a blessed moment where the fullness of God is seeking expression like that never-ending jug of oil that just kept pouring and pouring. Because I have chosen to close myself off to the limited thinking of my mind and the fears and say, I'm going in partnership with God. That is Spirit that gives me the power to experience wealth, to get wealth, so I can share that. I've come into this world to be that light, to allow it to flow from the inside out, to make a difference. And I'm going to remember Spirit first in all things. So when I hit the resistance or the boulders, the challenge, the first things I don't think about, there's no path here. But wow. This is the path that God has chosen for me, and somehow it fits into the perfect picture of this journey that I don't yet know until I get to the end, but I'm trusting with God. All things are possible, and as the good begins to show up, it is the first fruits that I return to the storehouse. It is the honoring of that Spirit in the one place that I find it manifesting in all places. And so as I choose to feel the richness and the joy and the freedom and the security and the peace from knowing that I live and move and have my being in this sea of infinite treasure and infinite good, and that I am able to see from the depths of my being the richness that is seeking to catch that current up, that wellspring from the inside out and out to share with the world, and know that I cannot outgive God as I step into this vortex of being that wonderful outflow of Spirit. That source from me surges in 10 times greater than I could ever imagine. And my gift this day that I commit is a relationship of collaboration with God. I'm putting God first, and it is making God my partner, if you would, that allows me to step forth with a greater faith and belief in that which is mine to do in this world. And I find that I am supported, that each and every one of us is supported in the expression of that greater good. So I know that God's grace is my sufficiency, that God's grace is the truth of who I am. All that I could ever need is the grace that is is upon me in this moment. It is grace that has brought this to me, this moment, to be able to say, I believe at a new level. I'm willing to stretch beyond where I was. My gift is making a difference in this spiritual community known as Seaside as well as my life. I just listen and feel that breath of grace that moves through me in this very moment of the divine realization, in this field of greater understanding of Spirit's motion. It's my life.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved and set me free. I once was lost, but now I found I was blind, but now I see. Amazing grace. Was grace that taught my heart free, and grace my fear relieved. Oh, how that grace I first received was grace through many dangers, toils and snares. I have already come. Oh Lord, I have already come. Yeah, yeah. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace relieved me home when we've been there 10,000 years. Bright, bright, shining as the sun. Oh, we would know less days to sing the Holy Spirit's praise. Oh, we first begun. Oh, and all the children sang, Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved and set me free, that saved and set me free.
Sister Jamie Lula. That's what I wanted. That was beautiful. Woo. Hey, first service didn't get that song, so just know you were blazed. Hey, how come? My mother gave you all the singing tools, I didn't get them. So, well, look at that. And not everybody wears orange, and both of you guys have it going. Nice job.
And if you're so inspired, consider coming by seasidecenter.org and give a donation. It will be greatly appreciated and really make a difference.